Good morning. Good morning, everybody. I know that everybody's very excited, so am I, so are the presidents, and we shall go on with our Model European Parliament. Firstly, I would like to ask the President of the Riigikogu, Mrs. Energma, to have a speech.
Head noored, mul on hea meel tervitada teid Eesti Vabariigi Parlamendi Riigikogu saalis. On tore, et olete aktiivsed ja tahate ise olla oma riigi ja Euroopa Liidu tulevikku määravate küsimuste lahendamisel. Kas või noorte tööhõive, mis on üks teie mõttevahetuste keskmes olevaid teemasid. Kes võiks veel omada paremat ülevaadet sellest, mida on vaja teada enne, kui hakatakse aitama noortel tööturul toime tulla kui noored ise, ehk siis teie siin saalis.
Dear young people, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the Assembly Chamber of the Riigikogu, Parliament of Estonia. It is so wonderful that you are active and want to be the ones who solve issues determining the future of your countries and the European Union. Take, for example, youth employment, a focal issue in your deliberations. Who knows better than the young people what needs to be known? Before young people are assisted to cope with the labor market. Of course, these people are you, sitting here in this chamber.
Ka mulle on väga südamelähedane noorte käekäik. Kui võtame eesmärgiks noorte suurema tööhõive, siis peame möönma, et inimeste tööalaste võimaluste ning sotsiaalse toimetulekuvõime kujundamisel on väga suur roll haridusel. Me ei saa lubada noortel haridussüsteemist välja kukkuda, vaid peame aitama ja toetama noori koolide jätkamisel.
How young ones are getting on is also a topic very close to my heart. If our aim is to increase employment among the youth, we have to admit that education plays a tremendous role in shaping people's opportunities for work and ability to cope socially. We must not allow the young people to drop out of the education system and must encourage and help them to continue their education.
Tulevikuvalikute avardamiseks on vajalik korralik üldharidus ja ka kutse- või kõrgharidus. Selline haridus, mis võimaldaks olla oma erialal professionaal, kes suudab õppida terve maailma kogemustest ja soovib pidevalt oma teadmisi täiendada ning vajadusel ka ümber õppida. Neid sihte silmas pidades on Eesti viimasel ajal soodustanud ka pooleli jäänud kõrghariduse jätkamist.
A proper general education as well as vocational and higher educations are prerequisites for good choices in the future. We need education which will allow a person to be a true professional in their field, able to learn from experience of the world and wishes to broaden knowledge and, if needed, to be retrained. Keeping these objectives in mind, Estonia has in recent years promoted continuation of the unfinished higher education.
Noorte ees on järjest suurenev hulk valikuid. Te peate olema suutelised tegema teadlikke otsuseid. Siin Mudel-European Parliament ürituste raames ammutades samuti palju uut informatsiooni ning lisaks erinevate sisuliste teemade arutamisele saate te ka väga hea kogemuse koostööst ja aruteludes ühisosa leidmisest.
The choices for the young people are constantly increasing. You have to be capable of making aware decisions. Here, within the framework of the events of the Model European Parliament, you will receive a lot of new information and in addition to discussing various essential topics, acquire an excellent experience of cooperation and finding common ground in discussions.
Eesti MEP-i patroon Tunne Kelam võib teile kindlasti oma kogemustest Euroopa Parlamendist rääkida, kui oluline on Euroopa poliitikas läbirääkimiste roll, kui oluline on kuulata ära teiste seisukohad ja mis peamine, kui oluline on leida ühisosa ja selles kokku leppida.
Tunne Kelam, member of the European Parliament and patron, most certainly can tell you about his experience in the European Parliament and important role of negotiation in European politics, very important ability to hear others' positions, and most essentially, find common ground and see eye to eye.
Püüeldes resolutsioonide koostamisel tasakaalu poole, mõistate, mis on võimalik, mis mitte ja kus on tasakaal 2, 3 või isegi enama seisukoha vahel. Siin, täna, õpite te ühiseid seisukohti tutvustama ja põhjendama. Soovin teile algavaks 2 päevaks jõudu tööle, sisukaid arutelusi ja hääletage ikka südametunnistuse järgi.
Striving towards balance in compiling of your resolutions, you will perceive what is doable and what is not, and where the balance lies between 2, 3, and sometimes even more positions. Today here you will learn to introduce common positions and explain them. I wish you success for these 2 days and many fruitful discussions, and may you always vote in accordance with your conscience.
Thank you very much, and I wish you very good time in Tallinn.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Ergman. For our next speaker, may I ask the member of the European Parliament and the patron of Mudel-European Parliament, Tallinn, Mr. Tunne Kelam, to have his speech.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Dear fellow parliamentarians, it's one of my most exciting speeches from this chair. I've been member of this parliament since 1992, and I've been chairing many sessions, including very dramatic night sessions, which lasted from one afternoon until the next morning. But I think this is one of the most important events in the 90-year-long history of this parliament. This parliament has been built into a medieval castle, which was started in the 13th century. But it's quite interesting, only we lack seats, as you see. But our voters are putting pressure upon us even to reduce the number of seats here from 101 to, let's say, 80 or 60. But we have managed to resist so far this pressure. Anyway, I think it's good to remember that the current year is proclaimed the European Year of Volunteering. And the European Parliament initiated this. We adopted a resolution 2 years ago. I was one of the co-signers. And I think this is the main message to you and to us all. This is about volunteering, about citizens' initiatives. Estonian independence, too, was restored as a result of our history's biggest citizens' initiatives. And first, we managed to create, still under occupation, a temporary parliament, elected despite Soviet authorities. This was called Congress of Estonia, and this came together in 1990, 1.5 years before restoration of independence. But this meant the possibility to create a democratic alternative, still within a dictatorship. The experience and lesson, which is perhaps very useful for fledgling democracies in North Africa and in many parts of the world. But I think for you, the message is that you should always look for whether things could be done in a different way. Never be satisfied with the existing solutions. It is the only way not to turn into party broilers or political careerists. This means also taking responsibility for your decisions and actions. Ministers and governments, even members of parliaments, come and go in a democratic society. But personalities remain. Personalities with their view of the world, with their character, and I would say with their reliability. Because it's not enough when we declare that we have freedom, democracy, and human rights. Freedom means anything only in connection to responsibility. Freedom without responsibility is nothing. It could lead to chaos and escape from democracy. And my experience is that you should never take things for granted. Estonia is a good example to show that everything is possible. We proclaimed independence 93 years ago. Excuse me. 93 years ago, and it was a miracle. We succeeded to defend it against the Soviet Union's aggression, and then we lost it in 1940. And we succeeded to regain independence only 20 years ago. So this is a proof that impossible could be achieved. But also Estonian example shows that everything could be lost. Nothing is guaranteed automatically. And I think this is the most important message for you who have been born in free societies, wherever you come from, eastern or central and southern part of Europe. You take these democratic freedoms, parliaments, as for granted. Because my experience shows that the reverse course is always possible, on condition that we become passive, lazy, and indifferent. There's an interesting theory that there is a cycle starting from bondage, from slavery. And then comes the stage of spiritual faith, like it happened in Poland in 1980, where Solidarność came to existence, just as a result of spiritual force and faith. And this faith produces great courage to oppose dictatorship. And great courage usually leads to liberty. That's clear enough. Now, liberty tends to lead to abundance, to welfare. And this is a crucial point. Many of us are today. Abundance is poised to lead to selfishness. And if you concentrate upon selfishness just to exercise our own rights, to fight for our own well-being, not regarding the others, then selfishness can easily lead to complacency. Complacency leads to apathy. Apathy leads to dependency, and you are back to bondage. Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, which was created in the 1930s, is a warning about soft version of a totalitarian society. The European Union is based upon common values, and you represent these values. European Parliament actually is operating and functioning as a sort of world conscience, reacting to all human problems, catastrophes, human catastrophes, natural catastrophes, taking positions immediately, at least once a month, if needed, even more rapidly. And as you know, the European Parliament rewards every year one person with Andrei Sakharov Prize, who have fought in a very difficult conditions for liberty and democracy. It is symbolic also that the European Parliament, exactly 2 years ago, adopted the first resolution on European conscience and totalitarianism. We tried to react to the heritage which many new countries from Central and Eastern Europe brought into Europe, and which was not known and not assessed morally and politically. And I think, I would say, my experience is how much we could and ought to learn from each other. You represent here 30 nations of Europe, and the history and experience of every nation is so interesting and so valuable. And my biggest disappointment in the European Parliament was how little interest there was for the latest history of the new member states. So, only a few years ago, there was published the first common history book of French and German history. But we should follow this path. And 2 years ago also, my party group, the European People's Party, supported the idea to publish a book which is called Reunification of Europe. This contains, for the first time, the latest histories of 10 former post-communist nations who have now become members of the European Union. It's available in English, in French, in German, in Romanian, I think, and in several other languages. So if you have any interest, you could order this book. But revolutions in North Africa and Middle East today show us one of the most burning problems for the European Union. We are officially a value-based community, but our practical policies are often very different. And events in North Africa show that you can't domesticate dictators like Gaddafi. You can't hope for false stability just presuming that they could become more democratic and then we can get oil and gas from them. It's not working, actually. And I think the lesson your committees should draw is that value-based policy is the most reliable and most practical and far-reaching policy you could imagine. We are pressing Lady Ashton for months to take courage and be more demanding in conducting this value-based policy. And values are also related to our economic crisis. Only this Tuesday, the European Parliament had debate with the presence of Herman Van Rompuy and President Barroso about the results of the European Council, and it dealt with economic crisis. And once again, you and us in Brussels and Strasbourg need to remind that economic crisis is rooted in moral crisis, in the crisis of values. So we should address this part of the crisis. Estonia has proved last month that balancing the budget, cutting expenditure is not necessarily a political suicide, as it is thought to happen. Estonian government, which balanced the budget, was re-elected with increased majority. So it's not impossible. And my good friend for 20 years, the recent president of the European Parliament, Hans-Gert Pöttering, told me when he was elected president of the Parliament that his experience shows that the biggest value in politics is trust, credibility. The fact that you are trusted, not changing the style, not trying to surprise with new ideas, but people like reliable representatives. Because it's illusion that new truth could be invented. Truth will always remain the same. It could be expressed in a new form, in a modern language, but the same truth and the same difference between truth and lies. And therefore, my call to you is that as economic crisis is not over, as we are going to face very turbulent times, there should be no illusions that safe future, affluent future will be guaranteed for us by people like me or by the European Parliament as it is now. It's your task to address this turbulent future. And therefore it's time for statesmen, not politicians. Statesmen are those who dare to take responsibility for next generations, for a long-term politics. Politicians are thinking usually about next elections and their personal re-election. But today we need statesmen like Robert Schuman, Alcide de Gasperi, Paul-Henri Spaak, Konrad Adenauer, Jean Monnet, and many others. They started also with huge challenge, how to overcome differences between national interests and the EU common interests. And they managed to settle these differences, but they are not settled automatically. I'm very much encouraged by your draft resolutions. I took a look at them yesterday evening. It's not time, Mr. Speaker, to dwell upon them. But let me end with reminding you about your personal responsibility. This is time not for collective decisions. Good political decisions should start from our personal value-based choices. And there's a story about an American senator who happened to die. He went to St. Peter and asked for the entrance to paradise. But St. Peter answered him, yes, but we too have reached modern times. So decision will be yours, not mine. And you have to experience both heaven and hell for one day. And then you are going to decide. Well, the first day, Senator went up to heaven. It was beautiful, good music, but he lacked his friends. And it was sort of boring compared to his earthly lifestyle. Well, next day he experienced hell. He came down by the elevator, down, and what he saw was quite contrary to his expectations. It was beautiful landscape, great country house, many friends, well dressed, all were joyous. They played golf, they had wonderful dinner. The old devil himself served them. He turned out to be a jolly good fellow, making jokes. And when there was a time to leave, it was just, he had such a good memories. So friends waved him Next morning, morning of the third day, he came back to St. Peter, and Peter asked him, "Now, what's your choice?" And he said, "Well, I'm just confused because throughout my whole life, I counted to entering the heaven. But now, hell turned out so pleasant and so many good friends there. Well, I decide for hell." "Okay, it's your decision." He went down again. The landscape had changed, as, for example, after Japanese catastrophe. His friends were in rags. They were taking waste, which was falling from heaven. All the landscape was grey, no sun, and they shoveled this trash to huge cans, and more trash came from the heaven. And then he met the devil and asked, "My friend, what has changed? Yesterday was so wonderful here." And the devil answered him, "My friend, yesterday we were in the election campaign. Today you voted. I wish you good decisions." Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Before we go on, I'm going to explain how the General Assembly is going to work. Those who are sitting on a balcony, you have a moving microphone. If you wish to have word, raise your hand or your country sign. And the delegates who are sitting on the floor, as you can see in front of you, there are buttons, colourful and grey. If you wish to speak, if you wish to ask a question, press the upper middle one. It's a four-letter word. Starts with an S, ends with an A. S, funny, O, N, and A. If you have pushed the button and you are given the right to speak, oh, very good, guessed 106 somewhere over there. If you wish to speak and you are given the word, then there's a red light that will go on the microphone. That indicates that you may start speaking. If you have pushed the button by mistake, then push it and you will be taken off the list. If there is a vote, then did you wish to speak? Okay. If you wish to vote, then you can see there are 3 different colors. And usually the green color means that everything's okay, so green is in favor. The red button is when you want to vote against, and the neutral yellow is abstentions. The votes from the balcony will be collected via almost electronic vice president, and you have to write the votes down. So if everything is clear, I would like you to turn off your mobile phones. No drinking, no eating while we're working. Lunch will be soon. I declare the General Assembly open.